Hey guys, it's Robert Gardner with the Robert Gardner Wellness Podcast. I'm really happy to have Vanessa Bouche. Did I pronounce that correctly, by the way?
You did. Thank
Bouche,
you.
yes. I added the little mark.
Correct.
So you, compared to me, and I want to point this out, during COVID, during an age of lack of debate generally across social media platforms, you are a PhD and have tons of information about human trafficking in relation to the massage industry that I can't get from a 15-minute Google search.
Yeah, that's right. That's mostly right.
And that's why I want you on to like compare and contrast ideas. We're both involved in the massage industry. You're also in Texas. You're in the Dallas area. I'm in Austin. Can you tell people a little bit about you, how you came to do or become interested in what you're interested in, and then we'll go ahead and just kind of kick off the discussion.
Sure. So I am, as you said, Vanessa Bouche. I have my PhD in political science, and I was a professor at TCU for 9 years. And recently actually resigned from my position as a tenured faculty member to pursue social entrepreneurship. And so now I am a co-founder and CEO of a business called Severa, which provides jobs to survivors of trafficking who face significant barriers to employment. In my work as a professor of political science for about 15 years, I did a lot of scholarly activity around the issue of human trafficking, both in the United States and internationally, as sex trafficking as well as labor trafficking, and approached it from a variety of different perspectives. The policy perspective, interviewing and surveying survivors of trafficking, interviewing convicted individuals who had engaged in human trafficking in federal prisons, looking at the economic impact of trafficking, specifically in what we call the illicit massage industry, and looking specifically in Houston. So approach the issue from a lot of different angles over the 15 years that I was working on it as a professor and as a scholar. And it was about I would say, 2018 or so, that this question of illicit massage industry started to kind of arise within the anti-trafficking community. And the reason was that we started seeing all of these kind of interesting looking, quote unquote, massage establishments pop up all over the country, pretty rapidly in pretty quick succession. And the way that law enforcement was handling it at the time was that they were going in and arresting the workers on prostitution charges. Now, of course, in order for law enforcement to arrest someone on prostitution charges, the actual act has to at least commence. And so there's a lot of issues with that and questions around even just the ethics of law enforcement going in to arrest them on prostitution charges whilst they benefit, quote unquote, right, from the services. But regardless, that's how law enforcement was kind of handling it. It's like, oh, these are places of prostitution. We're going to go in there and we're going to arrest the women that are working on prostitution charges. And the question within the anti-trafficking community became, is that the truth, or is that a false narrative that's being told? In addition to that, these places wouldn't exist if there wasn't demand for these places to exist. And so I started working on a project looking at demand for illicit massage businesses in Houston. And the way that I did that was there's a website called rubmaps.ch. And on it, there's lists and lists and lists of establishments that people go to and write reviews, specifically using kind of cover type of language around different sexual services that you can get at different establishments. And the users, it's a user generated site where the users provide reviews and say like how much they pay for an average service, how much they tip, what kinds of workers are there. So like ethnicity of the workers, what kinds of services you can get. And so went on Rub Maps, kind of extracted or scraped all of the data from businesses that were listed in Houston, took essentially a random sample of those and just literally counted the number of people that walked into those businesses. Now, every single one of the ones that we ended up counting, there was not a single female customer the entire time. And so again, like another kind of red flag is, oh, that's very interesting. Obviously, women get massages just as much as men, I would think, right? And so why is it that only males go to these places? I did the analysis, and long story short, was able to discern through various econometric analyses that the illicit massage industry in Houston, Texas alone is about $107 million gross revenue annually. So big business. And it's estimated that I hesitate to say employees, but that there are about 30,000 as a conservative estimate, what we in the anti-trafficking space have termed like victim workers, essentially, in these places. Now, that being said, at the same time, the anti-trafficking community, now that this has been on their radar, there's been just this outrage about these establishments. And as with all anti-trafficking legislation since the year 2003, when the very first states passed legislation on human trafficking, there has been a flurry of anti-trafficking legislation and activity. And much of this legislation really makes no sense. And as an analyst and as a scholar, I look at it and I'm like, why are we passing this legislation? Has anybody ever looked at whether it's efficacious, whether it's actually effective, whether it's doing what we want it to do? Also, what is the goal here, right? Yeah. Is the goal to make it more difficult for licit businesses to stay in business and to do their job? Or is the goal to really be like pragmatic about this, about how we're doing this, and actually to recover victims, restore victims? And, I even hesitate to say obviously you want to bring the individuals who are engaging in human trafficking, you want to bring them to justice. Then the question is what exactly does justice look like, right? And so anyway, but the reason why all of this legislation passes is because it's extremely politically expedient and popular for legislators to say that I am an anti-trafficking legislator, right? It's a bipartisan issue by and large, although I have things to say about that as well. And because of that, it's definitely something that legislators want to claim credit for among their constituents, because the general public tends to get outraged when they hear about it. A lot of the reasons they get outraged is because of the sensationalized nature of the news on the issue, rather than the truth of the issue. But nevertheless, there's been this flurry of activity. And what I started to see and become pretty just disappointed in was the extent to which the state of Texas was putting very onerous restrictions and regulations on the licit massage industry, while it makes no sense to do that in the context of trying to combat the illicit massage industry. Yeah. And so that's kind of how I've come to all of this and where I'm at on it now.
Oh boy. This is
there's lots of directions we could go.
This is not enough for one podcast.
There's many directions we can go with this.
If you were all powerful, and we know that we have to deal with our population, the government, politics, laws, lawmaking, enforcement, there's so many layers. If you were all powerful, what would you try to do to help licit businesses and then decrease illicit business from your vantage point, because you're more studied?
Well, first of all, my understanding of the regulations number one is the definitions within the law itself. And so, within my I wrote an op-ed that was in the Fort Worth Business Press on this, because more and more laws were at least being proposed by the Texas legislature that were just kind of uncannily, they just didn't make sense. If your goal is to combat human trafficking, putting these restrictions on the illicit massage industry. So the definitions. First of all, there's a lot of, I think, conflation of the definition of what is a massage establishment, what versus what also exists in the law, which is a massage parlor, versus sexually oriented businesses, right? Like there's all of these things and ways, definitions and classifications. And what ended up happening, I believe, is that there was this wrongful conflation of massage establishments with illicit massage businesses that are actually sexually oriented businesses and effectively massage or sex parlors, right? But because the law there's a definition of massage parlor, I think people just started conflating like, oh, well, one way that we can attack the illicit massage industry is if we put more regulations on the massage industry so that we can regulate them as though they're legitimate businesses, even though we know that they're actually not legitimate businesses. And then that makes no sense. Yeah. Right? So if I had my druthers, what I would do is I would define the illicit massage industry based on what it is. I would really not use the word massage at all, because I think that that's become part of the issue, is the conflation of these things.
Yep.
And I would probably just call it a sex parlor. And in the definition of sex parlor, you say that sex parlor engages in all of these various types of acts, one of which could be massage, right? But then you're completely separating the two. And the occupation code, one should be in the criminal code. The other should be right in the occupation code. So,
man, so long story short, I use multiple cameras. I can flip camera angles live. I'm doing private live streams, group live stream classes. I can't offer any of that information for CE credit in Texas, because Texas doesn't allow hands-on instruction online. And part of the reason I contacted you was, over the years, my work is kind of weird, because it's mat-based, clothes on. I started filming and photo documenting everything, and over the years, like, I have a following of massage therapists, but there's a lot of massage therapists who say, I don't understand, this isn't massage. And I go, great, then we don't need licenses in all 50 states and I can teach anybody. And they're like, oh, but no. And it's like, okay, I have 3 licenses alone in Texas. That doesn't include Arkansas, Louisiana, ABMP membership, AMTA membership, NCBTMB approved provider, and filing each additional class to try to deal with all this regulatory red tape. I look at Stretch Lab and Stretch Zone. They're hiring personal trainers and yoga teachers, and they're doing essentially what looks to me like hands-on manipulation of soft tissue. And they're like, no, that's different. And I go, oh, your definition of massage doesn't equate with what I think is going on when I have conversations with my lawyer. Like, the language they're using and the way they're defining those terms is like, basically, as I see it sometimes, it's like it's benefiting big business and it's fighting me from like delivering stuff online because all the therapists want CE credit. Then what really blew my top was I read an article and they said, this is why we don't want online education in the massage industry. It's going to lead to more human trafficking. And I'm like, I've had it. I'm done. I talked to a school owner in Houston. Houston, to my knowledge, you correct me if I'm wrong, 4th largest city in the US, #1 for human trafficking. Huge port city.
It's, I hesitate to say that it's #1 for human trafficking because the statistics that people use to make that claim are not necessarily accurate, but nevertheless, it doesn't matter if it's number 1 or number 5 or whatever. Yes, there is a trafficking issue in Houston, just like there is in Dallas, just like there is anywhere. So
a school owner in Houston, I did a training at her place years ago, and so we had a conversation over dinner with her husband. She explained to me that people would call her and say, listen, we'll give you $10,000 per transcript. And what they wanted her to do was falsify records so that they could, and it's like, ooh, man, that's a lot of money to fake some paperwork. I'm like, the industry is butting up against these things. You and I might have some differences of opinion on how to deal with it. The challenge is, how do you actually, as you said, in a pragmatic way, solve the problem and stop putting increased regulation and monetary issues against the massage industry, people who are running illicit businesses?
Right. So it's really unfortunate to me. I don't know exactly what the justification was in that article that you're referring to as to how online massage instruction would lead to more trafficking. What did why?
So here's the basics. This is what I see. There's a slippery slope. If Texas allows online education for continuing education, then it's going to lead to an online massage school for core curriculum. Oh, we can't have that. People are going to falsify records, and there's going to be more human trafficking. They're using that as a justification to block online education, and online education is where I shine. Like I'm eating an industry from my studio, just running cameras, teaching people live, both interactively and in group classes. The issue is blocking online education doesn't have anything to do with human trafficking as I see it. I keep going, wait, there are already laws. We already have brick and mortar laws. Just enforce the laws that already exist. Human trafficking is already illegal.
Right. So once again, I think it's an issue of conflation. It's absolutely, there's a huge issue, as we all know, with just with self-made pornography now. The what's the app called? Anyway, OnlyFans. Thank you. OnlyFans. I flaked on that for a second. OnlyFans, all of these things. And so then all of a sudden it becomes, well, oh, if you're touching people on a screen, then that could lead to, I don't know, and I don't know, because it's okay, are people trafficked on screens? Are people trafficked for the production of pornography? No, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I have no idea.
Yeah. So there's in the studies that I've done with survivors of trafficking, when I asked them how they were trafficked, in what types of industries were they trafficked in strip clubs, were they trafficked in the production of pornography, were they trafficked on the track or on the street, were they trafficked online, right? A surprising number say that they actually were trafficked to create pornography. So are people trafficked on screens? Yes. Enforcing that, this is what I believe. Enforcing that is much harder than enforcing legal activities of business owners. And so what we end up doing is the easy thing, and conflating things that are actually very, very different, just to claim that we're doing something, right? So rather than getting to the root of the people that are actually committing the crimes and actually trafficking people on screens, instead you just make these claims that oh, that could lead to, and I don't understand. That's why I'm saying are people trafficked on screens? Absolutely. What does that have to do with online instruction for continuing education credits for massage therapists? I don't know. I don't know.
There was an issue, and this is the complexity. I'm a CE provider. Almost everything I have produced, I cannot offer Texas massage therapists CE credit online because I am blocked from teaching hands-on instruction online for CE credit. You want to make it more fun? I finally get the technology set up. Not as nice as it is now, but it was set up. I taught a class online for Thai style foot massage. The only bare part of the body is the feet. Like I haven't had somebody take off their clothes in years. I work completely clothed on a mat.
Yeah.
So I'm a little mouthy. I have opinions. I taught the class. I made sure to have my Bluetooth in so students could text or call and ask me questions live. A student called in and proceeded to just bitch me out for several minutes live. You couldn't hear her because she was in my Bluetooth, and I just lost it. I'm like, I've done all this and I do all this work, and I'm being attacked because Karen doesn't like my opinions. So Karen took it of herself to report me to TDLR. I get a notification from TDLR. The regulators are calling me and going, "What did you do? What did you say?" And I was like, hold on. She told you in a message what she said, or what was said, what I did. And she provided an entire video of the actual class, which is why I'm like the police now. I record myself. And I'm going, okay, so how can someone in Arkansas report me to TDLR in Texas when Texas doesn't allow me to teach online for CE credit? I'm teaching on the internet. This is beyond Texas jurisdiction. I have no geographic borders teaching on the internet. And here's what has to happen. That lady in Arkansas, Karen, is using up valuable resources with Texas regulators to try to go after me because I had an opinion she doesn't like, instead of going after what? Human trafficking. And this is the thing, like it sets a precedent where anybody on earth can call from Japan, report me to TDLR, and cause me regulatory and legal issues. Like, what do y'all want me to do? It's like, if it's outside of your jurisdiction, you don't allow me to teach online for CE credit. What does this have to do with TDLR?
So,
and this is me as illicit business, you know, just begrudging the current like regulatory climate and how it affects my business. So go ahead.
Right. So you are able to provide CE credits for students outside of Texas,
depending on that state's laws, and there are 50 states of sets of laws. So when a student in Mississippi says, "Can I get?" I'm like, "I don't know," and they're like, "What do you mean you don't know?" I'm like, "There are 50 sets of laws. I don't know your state. I can barely figure out what Texas regulation literally means."
Right.
I'm nationally certified. National certification as a CE provider, when those are approved for like home study, there are some states that allow me to jump certain hoops. And I'll use Arkansas as an example. I have classes that are approved in Arkansas. I have a license as a CE provider in Arkansas. I can go within Arkansas state borders and teach those approved classes. If I teach another class that's not approved by their board in their state borders, it won't count for CE credit because it's not approved by their board. But if they come into Dallas and I teach the class and it's approved for national certification credits, Arkansas students can use it, so long as I don't teach within Arkansas's state borders. Now, why would Arkansas have that law? And you're smiling because I think you know why. Because state boards and I say boards, school owners and stuff in Arkansas don't want competition. And I'm going, I have a subscription service for $7 a month where I've put a recording of every class I've taught since 2017. Like, what's going on here? It's like disparate. So back to the issue of human trafficking. How knowledgeable are you of like human trafficking like across the United States, and like particular issues in other states, even though we're most familiar with Texas?
Very familiar.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, trafficking is an issue. It really is an issue everywhere. But there's a couple of things that are unfortunate about the way that the movement, I would say, has taken shape. One is the over sensationalized narrative of human trafficking that oftentimes is misidentifies or the who the typical victims tend to be in these cases. And so the typical narrative, if you just Google sex trafficking, just Google sex trafficking, and you go to Google Images, you're going to find that the first page of pictures is all a couple things. One, white girls, false narrative. Two, in chains, false narrative. Three, like completely beaten and, looking all haggard and stuff. Less of a false narrative, but, not always the case. And then four, if there is a perpetrator behind them or around them or whatever, it's typically painted as a person of color. Right. So you have, there's a lot of very troubling racial implications for the way that the issue of trafficking has been framed, and the narrative around it and the sensationalizing of it. And so that, that's something that's troubling, something that's problematic. And unfortunately, though, the reason that narrative exists is because nonprofits have to raise funds. And that narrative speaks to the people that make donations more than the true narrative, which is, that the plurality of victims in the United States are women and girls of color, many of whom come from child protective services, foster care, juvenile detention, and maybe have substance abuse issues, potentially teen pregnancy. That's really that is predominantly who the victims tend to be. Lower educated, don't finish high school. And so when you look at really what it would take to combat the victimization of girls for the purpose of sex trafficking, what it would take is doing those things that most of these same people who give a lot of money don't necessarily want to do. So looking at interventions in inner cities and looking at, providing services to girls that otherwise are deemed kind of like throwaways. So that's kind of, it's unfortunate how the narrative has evolved over time and the sensationalizing that has taken place, because it is a very large problem. And unfortunately, with the advent of social media and the ability for traffickers to recruit in more ways than just meeting someone in person, and being able to see people's vulnerabilities online and that sort of thing, like it is a big problem, and it's not going away. I mean, if anything, it's only gotten worse. But the problem is that it's sensationalized, number one, and number two, the framing of it since the very beginning has been around criminal justice. It's been around, we need to criminalize trafficking. We need to prosecute the traffickers. We need to put them in jail. And then there's not a whole lot of services for the survivors. Unfortunately, it is a criminal justice issue, but that's only a little tiny part of it. It's a human rights issue. And So that type of framing, though, is also what has led to this smattering of laws on trafficking across the country, in every state across the country. And part of that has then been, how do we, or can we, like, clearly we're not necessarily making a dent by only making it a criminal justice issue. So how do we then attack it from the civil side, right? How do we create, is it possible to create regulations within those industries where traffickers may exist, or at least, appear to exist, and then approach the problem from a regulatory standpoint and shut them down by bankrupting them with fees than any other way. So that's kind of where we're at with the illicit massage business right now.
What I hear from legitimate businesses, illicit massage businesses, even here in Austin, there was a young lady that owned a facility, and there was another massage facility in a shopping center, and she said, "This is not good. This is not a legitimate, business." She continually reports them. TDLR can't do anything, and then the police say, "Sorry, it's just not a priority. We only have so much resources." And I do what I always do, and I sit back and I go, "Okay, we know that heroin, cocaine, and all these fentanyl, we know that all this is illegal, but you can still buy it in every major city in America. Where does the money go?" And it's like every bank in the world just goes, "Oh, we don't know where those billions of dollars went." And it's like, it's got to go somewhere. It's got to be laundered somehow. When you talked about it initially, you said like 30,000, I think, was like numbers. And then what was it 100 million? Was it over 100 million?
About, 107 million.
Yeah, I'm like,
revenue.
where does that go? Like, how can they not follow? Because this is why crime happens. There's money to be made. And it's like, where does the money go? How does it just vanish? And I don't have the answers to that. But again, I'm in my studio trying to cross state borders using the internet.
Yeah. No, I don't. I mean, I hear you, and it's very frustrating. It's very frustrating. I have to say, oops, I lost you for a second there.
Yeah, your video went off.
Yeah.
I got a good solid V.
That's exactly right. And here's the thing. It's very, very frustrating. I testified at a Texas Senate hearing with the executive director of TDLR and the head of TBAC. And overall, great hearing, no problems. But I have to say, from my perspective, that first of all, as a political scientist and somebody who has studied government bureaucracies from a scholarly perspective for a while, right? The thing about government is that when a program is created, it doesn't tend to go away. And then they have to continue to justify their existence, right? And so things just continue to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And the heads of agencies want to report all of the great things that they're doing so that they keep their programs, right? And so that was somewhat of what was going on. Obviously it's not their fault, because the legislature was the one who gave them the mandate to do this work. And so now they're just doing the work, they were given the mandate to go into the illicit massage businesses and to start looking around and scoping and, basically auditing for kind of tricky things, saying, "Oh, that looks suspicious. Oh, that looks suspicious," whatever. And just literally feet on the ground regulating these places. The legislature gave them the authority to do that. And so they now have to implement it. But the other thing that was happening was BYOB establishment. So the other thing that's happening is this conflation of, human trafficking is more likely to take place where there's alcohol. So now we need to be really monitoring any place that has a liquor or alcohol license, even if it's like, you know, uh, anyway, so that was why the TBC director was there. And then he started talking about BYOB establishments and how, because they're BYOB, um, we have no authority to regulate them, but there could be trafficking going on there. So essentially trying to plant the seeds that maybe TBAC should be TABC. I'm saying it wrong. Alcohol Beverage Commission, ABC, TABC, should be able to regulate the BYOB establishments because, they may have trafficking going on, and we wouldn't know it because we can't regulate them. And I just sat there, honestly, I didn't say anything, but shaking my head in my head going, I sure hope that the legislators see what's going on here. And if anybody in this room agrees that BYOB establishments should allow to be regulated by TABC on the basis that there may be trafficking in these BYOB establishments, like, have we gone mad? Like, have we gone mad? So, so it just watching it happen is very frustrating, but.
Yeah. One of the things, and again, I have a weird practice in my bodywork practice and then as an educator. Clothes on, completely clothes on. I don't have people take off clothes. Mat based. When I look at it, I'm like, why does massage become a front for human trafficking? And I'm like, nudity and privacy. And my work takes away both of them and says, nope, we work on clothed people in public. Like it's a yoga class, kind of.
Yeah, yeah.
And massage therapists haven't really understood that my model really switches things. But I have to deal essentially with the same regulation. And I keep going, okay, lawyer, Mr. Lawyer, sir, you charge $300 an hour. How is it Stretch Lab and Stretch Zone can hire people who aren't licensed? And how do I do that? And essentially he's like, he starts to, he's like, Robert, you're cruising. And it's like, no, it's not fair that a big business can do it and I can't.
Well, my question too is this. If instead of calling yourself a massage therapist, which is regulated by a profession regulated by the state, you instead started calling yourself an artist, all of this would be protected under the First Amendment. Whether it was closed or not, whether you were clothed or not, it would be protected under the First Amendment.
Yeah.
But because you are a regulated industry, there are these certain things that, I would ask, if I were a legislator, I would be asking deeper questions about why this regulation is in place. Tell me, what are your 3 good reasons for how this online instruction is going to facilitate or lead to, in any way, the exploitation of human beings? I need to know the reasons.
It's the slippery slope. If you open the bottle, it's just going to get worse. It's going to lead.
Then, if that's the case, then we need to start really talking about pornography instead of protecting it under the veil of the First Amendment. And nobody's willing to do that, right?
I believe so. Yes.
Except unless it's child abuse material online.
Yeah.
Child sexual abuse material. That obviously is regulated. But despite the fact that, it's very well known within the anti-trafficking community that people are trafficked into porn, that porn is used to groom victims within trafficking, to groom them to, on how to behave. It is used by buyers when they go to visit, when they go to have commercial sex acts with the person that they're buying. They say, I want you to do this. It's used across the board in trafficking. If there's any deeper connection between what facilitates trafficking and online material, it would be the porn industry. And it continues to get away with all of this because of its First Amendment protections. And I'm agnostic. I'm not agnostic about regulating porn. At the same time, I recognize that if you start to regulate porn, it's like it's already, the cat's out of the bag. So
Yeah.
good luck with that kind of thing. But it really makes no sense. And there's a lot of aspects of our laws that are very counterintuitive, contradictory, not pragmatic, not really thinking through things logically and critically. It's just it's kind of almost the tyranny of the majority. It's like the public gets outraged about
Welcome
something.
to democracy in America.
Yeah, so the public gets outraged about something, and these legislators are like, we have to please our constituents. Let's just do whatever we need to do to claim that we're making a difference. And then you actually look at what the difference is that's being made, and you realize it's actually, unfortunately, we're not moving the needle a whole lot. And when you focus your energy in areas that you're definitely not going to move the needle, like focusing your energy on minimizing the amount of online CE credit for massage therapists, like that's where you're going to focus your energy to combat human trafficking. Like, yeah, of course we're not going to move the needle, right?
Yeah. I used to say this, and again, I have opinions that make me unpopular in my industry sometimes. I'd say, listen, as far as I can tell, I mean, it just gets to the point where, listen, why don't we just make prostitution legal, tax it, regulate it, bureaucrat it to death, and then separate it from the massage industry? And they're like, no, that'll make the problem worse. And I'm like, oh, like worse than it already is? I get into a weird spot. So I know it's not the same thing. I don't want to conflate. I don't want to build a straw man, and you know, I'm not trying to engage in some sort of like logical fallacy. But is cannabis a problem for some people? Yes, but generally, I think people are like, yeah, it's legal, and it's not really causing, like, it's just like a very innocuous thing. But for years, it was the most evil drug. You know, weed led to heroin. And now it's like grandma's taking a bong load over in Colorado like it's no big deal. It's a little bit like that. My confusion about the massage industry is even therapists, they generally seem to go, no, regulate me more so we can cut this down. And I'm like,
so there's two things I have to say about that. The first is, from the massage therapist perspective, I understand why they're saying that. And that the reason I understand why they're saying that is that because it's because they know that they have nothing to hide, right? So, like, yes, it's a pain to make everything that I do more onerous, right? That's a pain. But if you're telling me that it's going to help combat trafficking somehow, and I have nothing to hide, fine, I'll do it. No big deal, no real skin off my back when real people are being exploited. So from their perspective, I kind of get it. It's like, I have nothing to hide, so fine, give me another regulation, whatever, I'll deal with it. From the legalization of prostitution perspective, however, I don't think that it's the same as cannabis.
No, I don't think it's the same, and I want to be clear that I wasn't exactly saying that. It's more an issue of like prohibition. But go ahead.
Right. So there are a lot of movements across the country in specific jurisdictions to legalize prostitution. Right now, there's a big movement in Oregon. There was a big movement in Washington, D.C. a couple of years ago. It ended up not passing, but prostitution will probably be legal in some states within the next several years. That's just my guess, because the movement to legalize prostitution is pretty strong. My issue with legalizing prostitution is, I have several issues with it. The first issue is that when you talk to buyers of sex, and you ask them, what would deter you from buying sex? their answer is getting caught by law enforcement, right? Like, I don't want to be arrested. I don't want to have misdemeanor, felony. I don't want to have to pay a big fee. I'm afraid of getting caught. And if the penalty of me getting caught is there, then that would deter me. And so legalized prostitution means taking away that penalty of getting caught, right? And so taking away the risk or the fear of getting caught among buyers. Take away that fear, and there's going to be a lot more buyers, right? Because these guys say that would prevent me. That prevents me from buying. If that was gone, yeah, I would buy more. So now you have an increase in demand. If there's an increase in demand in any market, whether it's sex or essential oils, right? There's an increase in demand. There's going to be someone that provides the supply. Now, let's think about the supply. Who is that supply going to be comprised of? Well, it's definitely not going to be comprised of women that willfully are in the commercial sex industry. The reason is that of studies that are done of women in prostitution, over 80% of them across the board every time, and this is in almost any study that you look at that has studied women in prostitution, when you ask them, would you be doing this if you had another alternative? The answer over 80% of the time is no. When you ask them why they're doing, or like what caused them to enter this industry, it is, as I was telling you before, it is poverty, it is drug addiction, it is lack of education, it is, all of these what we call push and pull factors that really push or pull women into this life. And when you bring a pimp into it or a trafficker into it, who is, somebody that doesn't have a loving home, doesn't have a loving family, has never experienced safety and significance by a authority figure in their life, and then this person comes along and gives them all of the love and affection and affirmation and things, right? Like fancy purses, fancy whatever, that they have been yearning for their whole lives. That's who's going to fill that supply. It's not going to be people that are willingly doing it. It's going to be people that are forced into it, whether because of their life circumstances or because they're picked up by a trafficker. And so that is why the legalization of prostitution movement makes no sense to me, because I know based on research of buyers that it's going to increase demand. And I know that demand will be met by women and girls who do not want to be doing this in the first place. And so that will actually lead to more trafficking and not less.
Does legalization, because we have prohibition of alcohol, did legalization of alcohol increase demand? And I don't know, I'm asking a question.
Well, no, it didn't. But I don't think that those are the same things, especially because you're talking.
They're not. I understand. Like, okay. I'm trying to draw parallels, but I understand they're not exactly the same thing.
Although I don't know if it did or. I mean, I honestly don't know. I have to look historically at the data.
I would argue, this is how I think of it, is like prostitution and drugs and gambling and Las Vegas and, is it health food? No. But it feels to me sometimes that anytime an activity is made illegal, everything about it that's bad increases. So for instance, and I use fentanyl as an example, heroin, opiates. I'm generally, this is me personally, don't take this against me if you're a massage therapist, you don't agree with me on this specific issue. I think all drugs should be legal, period. Cocaine, heroin, and they're like, oh my God, you're crazy. And I'm like, hold on. Legal, clean, pure, refined, controlled, taxed, regulated social programs for junkies and addicts. It's not health food. but everything bad about it seems to just get worse when it's prohibited across the board. It's created narco democracies in Central and South America. And I understand that I have limited background. I'm certainly, like, you're a PhD and you're dealing with human trafficking. I know that you know more about this specific issue than I do. And I don't want to feel guilty of like conflating, like building a straw man and saying, bull. No. At the same time, it seems like making it illegal makes problems worse. So I was hit by a drunk driver. That drunk driver was legally drinking before he got into a car. I've never once been like, this is why alcohol should be illegal, even though I had some negative repercussions from his life choices. That's the challenge I have with, quote unquote, and we could argue this, what a lot of people consider victimless crimes. It's like, I think one of the words you use that I find most appealing is pragmatic. I think generally you and I both are against human trafficking. I think probably we're against prostitution, against illegal drugs, against human rights violations. The challenge then becomes, how do we manage it in a pragmatic way for the benefit of society as a whole?
Yeah, and the reason that I would say that drugs and prostitution are not good points of comparison is because, by and large, when you are doing drugs, you're harming yourself, right? It's self-inflicted harm. Now, does it have secondary effects on your family, on your community, on your friends, on your... Absolutely. But the physical manifestation of harm is your body. Trafficking is different. It is the exploitation of another human being's body. And not just their body, their soul and their spirit too get crushed. But it is the exploitation of someone else's body. So it is me deciding that I can purchase not a product like drugs that I use once and then have to, go buy more. No, it's buying a human being to rent somebody else's body for an hour or 5 minutes, and inflict harm on them because I'm the consumer. So now I own you for this period of time, and you need to do whatever the hell I ask you to do, right? So you're violating somebody else's human rights to live a dignified, self-determined life. And that is why I think you're not conflating the two. And I understand that, but comparing the legalization of drugs with the legalization of prostitution is not correct, because, it's violating another human being, versus violating yourself, making the decision to inflict harm on yourself versus inflicting harm on somebody else.
When something is illegal, you get all the problems that go along with a black market. That's the thing that I keep going back to, and I like the distinction between a product that you're using harming yourself, meaning like illicit drugs, and then human trafficking violating somebody else's autonomy and human rights. It goes back again for this question for me. Let's say, again, this is not enough for one podcast. Like I could tell 5 minutes in, I'm like, dude, we could go down a rabbit hole on one specific issue so far. Like we'd have utilitarian philosophical principles about society at large. If you're a massage therapist and you live in the United States and you're licensed, you're running a illicit business, how then do massage therapists band together to try to prevent human trafficking? In other words, we all admit there's a problem, and we can argue about how to, degrees and things, but like, what do we do as the therapists on the ground?
Yep. I love that question, and I'll tell you why. Because I started a company called Savera, and Savera is a Hindi word that means new beginning. And it was actually named by our very first employees because they said that this company represents their opportunity for a new beginning, to live a new life. But we employ survivors of trafficking, and we're a wellness and lifestyle company. And the reason that we're a wellness and lifestyle company was very intentional. It was because we are genuinely about holistic wellness for the benefit of all of our stakeholders, whether that's our employees, whether that's the customers that enjoy our products, when people think of Severa, we want them to think of holistic wellness. And the fact that when you purchase our products, you're not only receiving a luxurious, premium, elevated essential oil product that is USDA certified organic, 100% pure, but in so doing, you're making yourself well while simultaneously making survivors of extreme exploitation well also. And so one thing that massage therapists could do to say that they are very directly combating human trafficking is by partnering with Severa as a wholesaler with our essential oils. Obviously, a lot of massage therapists use essential oils in their practice, obviously mixed with a carrier oil or whatever. And we have, honestly, some of the creme de la creme oils that you could purchase. So Severa is up here, right? You go to Severa.com and we take, we actually already have a good number of massage therapists that are wholesaling with us. But if you want to try out the products first, you can use a coupon code that you have, Robert, and I gave it to you. Massage.
I'm gonna put it up on the screen towards the end of the podcast.
Massage 25. Again. So anyone listening to the podcast and is interested in kind of experimenting with Severa's products, seeing what they're all about, you can use that coupon code and test them out if you want to. But that's a super direct way to be like, you know what? I am a massage therapist who stands against human trafficking in every way, shape, and form, which honestly, is probably the entire profession. Nobody is for human trafficking. It's not like that. So this is a really easy, tangible way to say, not only do I proclaim that I'm an anti-trafficking activist, but I actualize it by partnering with this wellness company that is providing restorative, dignified employment to survivors who have endured the traumas of trafficking. So that's a shameless plug.
Oh yeah, no worries. I knew shameless plug. We'd organize shameless plug. I don't worry. Yeah, people are weird. Sometimes in Facebook groups for massage therapists in particular, they have rules. There's no self-promotion. And I'm like, that is the worst business teaching principle I have ever heard. And I don't know why you're teaching massage therapists who already aren't good at business, bad business acumen out of things. I had a gentleman, there was an event I ran in Austin. Remember, my work is mat-based and clothed. I created an event years ago called the Thai Massage Jam. And the Thai Massage Jam was where I got together for 8 years, every Thursday night for 5 hours. And I worked on nearly anyone for free and taught for free. Publicly clothed. And people went, oh my God, you got naked? I'm like, no. This is a community bodywork event. Everyone is clothed. I take out my cameras, film, stream, talk to people. Somebody comes in with shoulder pain. They can't normally afford my session fee. And I go, cool, I'll just work on you for free at the jam. Yeah. Community bodywork event. I love that. I fostered that, nurtured that, and there was a gentleman who came in who worked with us, and he did really, really great work. He was a very do-it-yourselfer. He would do a lot of repairs on his own house because he would watch YouTube videos. And long story short, he eventually took, I think, my intro to Thai massage class, which is mat-based. A year later, I get a phone call from an angry massage therapist who says, hey, so-and-so is, practicing massage without a license. And I was like, who? And I once I figured out who it was, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I know him. I've had his work at the jam. He's taken one of my classes. And I was like, okay, listen, if he's practicing massage without a license, report him. And they said, no, but he's using your certificate. And I'm like, wait. My certificate doesn't give him a license to break state laws. Right. Like I've had clients take my class with their partner because they wanted to learn a little bit they could do on each other, And as she got riled up, she said, no, but he's practicing massage without a license. And I'm like, so report him. And she said, but TDLR won't do anything. And I go, so why are you calling me? Like, I'm not the massage police. Like, I can't. And here's the deal. I know him. At one point, he went to jail because he refused to pay federal taxes to fund another war. And I remember having a phone call with him later and saying, hey man, I just wanted to check with you real quick. You know that I'm an upstanding citizen running a illicit massage business, trying to help people in teaching. It's like, if I was to politely ask you to not do what you're doing and do massage without a license, what would you tell me? And in a very floral language, he was like, F yourself. And I went, cool, just wanted to make sure we were on the same page, because I continue to put out information, but people look at information differently when it's in a YouTube video as opposed to my subscription service, which is $7 a month. People literally, they find out that like a yoga teacher in Arizona will subscribe because they want to learn a little Thai massage and like blend it into their yoga class. And massage therapists find out that there are people who are not licensed studying with me online, and they start to get angry and they're like, you're not checking licenses? And I'm like, for $7 a month? Like, what? You want me to do a background check on somebody who's signing up for a $7 a month subscription service where I'm providing bulk footage of my classes? And this is, again, like, it was why I asked you, like, what do we do? Because we're on the ground level. There are people who just want me to go around and start reporting people. And I'm like, listen, Thai massage in its native homeland did not have a lot of regulation until very recently, including anatomy. It was just like an art that was passed down generation to generation. Then I'm a white guy in Texas, teaching this art form in like a very different cultural climate.
Yes.
I have enough problems trying to go teach in Arkansas. Like, I can't go around and like pick, and I've taken a Thai massage class. A yoga teacher's been in the class and told me very frankly that no state would ever regulate them from doing what they do in their healing work. And I just go, okay. There are therapists who think that I'm supposed to go out and report everyone, and I'm like, I don't have time. The problem is too big, and I have a limited amount of resources. How do I make the biggest impact? And I'm like, go back to your studio, turn on the cameras, and let's teach. It's way complicated. And, him doing a session without a license to me is like fairly small as far as a problem compared to like when we talk about human trafficking, not just on a US level, but like globally. It just boggles my mind. Even having the conversation with you, I'm very happy to see the depth and complexity of the problem, which if we can't even define it, then it's like, how do we solve it? How do we make, tangible differences in people's lives when we're operating from like limited information?
Yeah. I think that looking for ways, there's always ways to plug in to make a difference, but I do think that I empathize right now. That's why I wrote the op-ed, because I empathize with the regulations and the just the onerous regulations that are being put on small business owners for really reasons that are based in a lack of understanding of what's actually going to help and what's actually going to work. So, volunteer for an anti-trafficking organization, donate money, like, buy Zavera's oils, like all these things. Like, yeah, there's, and then obviously like be aware of the issue. And if you see something that looks a little bit sketchy, then you should definitely report that, right? But is it your responsibility to report people who are taking your classes that are not licensed? I mean, I don't know why would you have to
people, and here's the distinction. People can take my classes without a license.
Yeah, exactly. So why would you need to check licenses?
Say it again.
Why would you need to check if they have a license or
not? Massage therapists feel like they're an elite class. And I started making this distinction recently. I realized something because I started watching Bob Ross's The Joy of Painting. And I went, oh my God, I'm Bob Ross. Like I'm a curmudgeon and I'm angry and kind of, drill instructor-y like the guy from Full Metal Jacket sometimes. But I'm like, oh no, happy little trees. Anybody can learn to paint. Anybody can learn Thai massage. I'm going to show you. And that's the thing. It's like we don't have regulations against artists because there's no harm, right? But with massage, it's like, no, people could be injured, people could be this, people could be that. And I go, okay, yeah, it is possible, but let me educate the public and teach them about the bicep. Let me teach them about how to safely work on this on their partner. Let me make myself available for text message or phone calls. Let me make myself available for online group live streams, private live streams to answer their questions. It's kind of like the Thai Massage Jam is a little bit like couples massage on steroids. It's getting a community of people together. And one of the things I found, anytime I went to a state, all the therapists in my classes were like, man, I wish we had a Thai Massage Jam here, but Austin massage therapists don't participate in the Thai Massage Jam. And I think, and we shut down because of COVID, of course. I think the reason is because massage therapists are an elite, protected class, and they didn't like that I was giving away the secrets to the public and anybody who wanted it basically for free. Does it make sense?
That totally makes sense. And, I mean, I can't necessarily blame them. Sometimes I feel that way this is going to sound ridiculous, but as a political scientist, when you read the ridiculous things that people write on Facebook and they all think that they're political analysts, and you're like, no, you actually have no idea what you're talking about, but whatever, go ahead, try it, do it. So I get it. Like, again, I can understand where they're coming from a little bit, where they're like, wait a second, we have studied for years to learn how to do this. And these people just think that they're going to know what they're doing on the basis of one class. Like, no. So I get it. I get where they're coming from. And there's elitism. I think there's elitism probably in every profession.
Core curriculum in Texas is 500 hours. I don't really cover core curriculum in my online subscription service. I'm teaching them a slightly different art that's, again, mat-based and close-on.
Right.
There are 600 hours of my class recordings in that vault, and we upload new information every Monday. And now the videos are from 4 camera angles with anatomy on screen, and I'm teaching them more advanced like pain science through a mat-based perspective. And I'm like, well, what happens when there's 1,000 hours? Because I don't think, when I watch Bob Ross, I think he knew that not everybody was going to pick up a brush and do it. But one of the things I really liked about his stance, when I recognized myself in him, was like he was so encouraging and saying, yeah, anybody, you can paint a tree. Come on, let me show you how. I don't expect the public to be as good as a licensed therapist at all. Yeah. One of the reasons I had the jam was, let's say a class was $400 or $500. So the therapist comes in, they take a class with me, it's $400 or $500. They couldn't practice my work at any massage facility in Austin. No place allows mat work. That's not massage. So I would let them come to the jam to continue working with me, networking with me, find a job if a mat-based facility opened, and continue to essentially train them for free. And that's one thing that I think fundamentally I was just doing some weird things to the business model and the way I interacted with people socially that people are still a little confused about.
I get that. I get it. And I get it from both perspectives, truly. At Severa, we're kind of trying to disrupt an entire industry, which is a behemoth industry, but it's extremely opaque. There's a lot of lack of transparency. There's a lot of false claims made about quality of oils, purity of oils, about what oils can and cannot do. And it's problematic. And so here we are, enter this industry as a tiny little person and really trying to disrupt it by bringing a whole new level of transparency and values-driven entrepreneurship, we're a values-driven corporation, where we believe that our value is not just monetary, but also we bring value to society, to our employees, and to the planet. And so, trying to, doing things differently than the way that they have traditionally been done is hard. It's hard. It's an uphill battle. People are going to push against you. You are swimming upstream and you're going to face a lot of currents. And yet human beings don't like change. And so from their perspective, I understand the hesitancy, and protecting your turf, I get that. I totally get it from just a human psychology perspective. So, but what, I obviously am not an expert in anything at all having to do with massage or even the massage industry. All I know is the way that it's been conflated with trafficking, and that's troubling to me.
Yeah. And the reason, and this is the thing, I spend a lot of time in my marketing, like being a former philosophy student who got into a car accident, went into massage because of that chronic pain problem. I could perform a thought experiment, and I was having problems selling what I did because it was like, they were always like, I don't understand. What the hell is this mat? Where do I take off my clothes? And I'm like, no, this is different. Mm-hmm. The problem was I was trying to sell what I did like it was massage instead of selling it like what it is, which is for pain relief and mobility. I'm a soft tissue specialist who focuses on chronic pain problems. That's very different to their mentality than massage.
Yes.
And as I continued to do that, like you saw the differences, and I was like, I think fundamentally from the perspective of like the consumer, people on the outside, one of the key differences with what I teach is massage is typically done in the nude and in private, which means, unfortunately, sometimes other things are going on, which is how it becomes a front for illicit business. What I'm doing is completely close on to the point where I'm like, turn on the cameras and let's live stream us working on people.
Yeah.
And they're like, I'd go to a local massage school and teach, and they're like, yo, you can't film your class. And I go, but it's my class. And they're like, but we don't allow filming. And I'm like, why? And they go, oh, well, I guess you're not working on naked people. And it's like, yes, but even people in my area don't understand that about my business. Does it make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's why I think the framing of it is really important, where you said you need to shift the narrative around your framing from, from traditional massage to soft tissue, pain management, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Makes total sense.
Cool. Your websites are just above you, including Severo.com. In a second, I'm going to flip up the thing that has the information about the coupon code for everybody. They can contact you on Facebook down below. Do you have any additional information you want to put out to the audience? Is there any closing notes?
I would just say to the audience, thank you for what you guys do. As we were talking just now about the swimming upstream and the currents, I really feel like your profession is in a current for multiple reasons, not only because of the regulatory environment, but also because of our culture, where we are such a culture of, do, and lack of self-care and lack of taking a break and all of these things. And it reminds me that one time I was at the gym and I carved out a little bit of time to sit in the sauna. And I remembered feeling guilty that I had carved out that time to sit in the sauna. And I'm thinking, oh, I have so much to do. I really shouldn't be doing this right now. And there was a Brazilian woman in the sauna as well. And she said, I made a comment of like, I really shouldn't be here. I need to get going or something. And she said, you know what's wrong with you guys? Meaning Americans. She said, this is part of the culture of the rest of the world. In the rest of the world, sitting in saunas, getting massages, taking care of these parts of, the holistic care of your body is part of the culture. And in the United States, you guys feel guilty about doing those things. And it makes me really sad. And so all that to say, it's not only the regulatory environment, but it's also this environment of like, massage is a luxury instead of thinking it as massage is a necessity, right?
Yeah. And my goal, like Bob Ross, is I just went, It's already clothes on. Just bring people in and teach them. And people were like, I don't understand. Like, how are you going to make money if you're giving it away for free? And I'm like, listen, after Bob Ross did his show, every class was sold out. They want it in a different form. I package it online. I've had an educator say, online education in massage, online education doesn't work. And then I'm talking to her about my subscription service, and she's like, oh my God, you don't just give them everything, do you? And I go, well, yeah. And she's like, but if they learn it online, they're not going to take your classes. And I'm like, you just told me that online education doesn't work. Which is it? Either they can or they can't.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, so why do I have, and this is the thing, people got to think about this. In the massage industry, I have a lot of massage therapists who follow what I do. Why do I have you on the podcast? Because I do want to give back, but like, I have business interest in like promoting good, sound, logical discussions, promoting people doing good things that legitimizes my industry. It's a business decision to network with you, to network with people that know you, to like promote women, to promote human rights, to like,
thank you.
It's like, it's all these things where it's like people misconstrue it. We're like, well, Robert just wants to make money. And I'm like, no. Yeah. Okay, Bob Ross wanted to paint, and yeah, he wanted to make money, but he wanted to help people. That's I mean, we can argue about how it's done, but that's all it is. Like the no self promotion. It's like, you said, hey, I'll make a coupon code. You know, I'm like, sure, I'll run it through my email list. There was no like resistance. Like, I'm not going to promote her stuff. I'm not going to promote her business. And I'm like, why?
Well, and I was very thankful that you were willing to, because like I said, I believe very strongly that there is a amazing opportunity for strategic partnerships between massage therapists and Severa. And that's actually why I was supposed to go to the AMTA convention in Tampa before it got canceled. But I had a booth. I was going to have a booth there because it is a super, it would be a wonderful, wonderful connection and collaboration. I think for massage therapists to say, you know what, we care about trafficking. We understand the ways that our profession has been co-opted and misconstrued, and it's unfortunate. And here's all of the ways that we are working to combat it. And a partnership with Severa is just an obvious one. But here's one of our oils. We also have a bug spray. So yeah, been a great conversation, Robert.
Oh yeah. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. Vanessa, I don't want you to leave. I'm going to talk to you for just a minute after the podcast finishes. Listen, if you guys have like additional comments, you have questions, this is going to wind up on Facebook in addition to YouTube. Just comment in the comments section. Vanessa will probably be able to answer those as well as myself. If you want us to go head to head again and argue about stuff or debate, I'm sure that's probably a good thing. Just let me know what other topics you guys are interested in. I'll continue to differentiate the podcast over time into other industries. I really appreciate you guys tuning in, and you have a great day. Thank you for supporting the Robert Gardner Wellness podcast. And thank you to Vanessa for joining us today.